Ebusianfo masan so atena se aha Ghanatube so ensemne de edoso nia ekoso ewo oman Ghana mu ene ye kase ye beka ye mfiri hanim se adofo ensama ekoso ebini yenkonyenkotie.
The year-on-year inflation for the month of June 2025 has slowed significantly to 13.7% from the 18.4% post recorded in May 2025. This is the 6th consecutive decline in inflation for the year and the lowest since December 2021. Addressing the media, government statistician Dr. Alhassan Idrisu attributed the drop to sustained monetary and fiscal policy gains. More in this report.
Year-on-year inflation for the month of June 2025 dropped to 13.7% from the 18.4% posted in May 2025. This is the 6th consecutive decline in inflation for this year and the lowest since December 2021. According to data released by the Ghana Statistical Service, the decline was influenced by significant slowdown in the general price levels of foodstuffs and other items. Dr. Alhassan Idrisu is the government statistician.
So if you look at the trend in inflation for the past few months, both year on year and month on month, it signals price stability. And usually when you have these trends, what you need to do is to ensure that you sustain the trend.
While food inflation dropped by 6.5 percentage points to 16.3% from the 22.8% recorded in May, non-food inflation dropped to 11.4%. On reducing imported inflation, Dr. Idrisu charged businesses to take strategic measures which will reduce exposure to global economic shocks.
For businesses, we've seen inflation on locally produced goods declining faster than imported ones. So businesses can actually reduce their exposures to the global supply shocks that we are likely or we are experiencing already by increasing local sourcing, especially for food, packaging, and also logistics inputs.
The Upper West region recorded the highest inflation of 32.3%, largely caused by food inflation and utilities, whereas the Bono region recorded the lowest of 8.4%. On the future outlook of inflation for the rest of the year, the government statistician called for monetary and fiscal consolidation to support the gains achieved so far.
Sustainability of prices is extremely important, and the government has a big role to play in ensuring that these prices are sustained, because the prices, as I mentioned, are a function of a number of variables, some of which government has control on, others are external forces. So for example, if you take exchange rate, if the exchange rate continue to depreciate, it will definitely impact on inflation, both largely directly on imported inflation, but also on local inflation, especially inflation that relates to items which has inputs which are imported into the country. So it means that managing the exchange rate effectively is extremely important to stay the course. Number two, fiscal consolidation is also very important, and that's within the ambit of the Ministry of Finance, to ensure that they actually stay in the course with regards to the implementation of the IMF supported program, and also ensure that the fiscal consolidation agenda that it is pursuing is also on course.
Meanwhile, rent payment, electricity, refuse disposal and charcoal featured in the top 4 items which contributed to inflation for the month of June 2025.
Well, the International Monetary Fund Board is likely to meet and assess Ghana's performance for the 4th review on July 7, and this is what we've picked up from persons with knowledge of the country's engagement with the fund. George Yafi tells us more.
Oil business understands that Ghana has now met almost all the benchmarks that should aid the IMF board passing the country on the 4th review. Some of them include ensuring that Parliament passes the amended Bank of Ghana Act and government's plan on how it's working to restructure some of the state financial institutions and commercial banks. Sources say all the necessary documents have been sent to the IMF this week to ensure that we meet the 4-day deadline before the board meets on Ghana's program. Joy Business is learning that the IMF board will go ahead and pass Ghana on the fourth view. This will lead to some $360 million being released to the Bank of Ghana's account before the end of next week. We should also not forget that Parliament yesterday approved some $360 million loan from the World Bank, and that could result in the reserves of the Bank of Ghana increase by more than $720 million by the end of this month, a move that could go a long way in helping stabilize the Ghana cedi.
I want to analyze these economic issues better. Joining us via Zoom is economist Professor Patrick Esuming. Thank you so much, Professor Esuming. And first of all, we want to begin with inflation matters. From the figures you've seen so far, what do you think may have played that significant role when it comes to the rate of increase for prices slowing?
Good evening, Pius, and good evening to viewers. Thanks for having me. So when you look at the numbers, the decline is quite substantial and also very broad-based. So if you divide it by whichever category, if you look at inflation on imported versus domestically produced items, or if you look at food versus non-food, whichever way, we've seen that there's a broad-based decline. So I think it appears that both supply side factors as well as the demand side issues that the central bank has been dealing with, it appears that they are beginning to take effect. So, the currency appreciation, the pass-through, we expected that it will take some time. We are beginning to see a lot of that take hold. And then, when you see such broad-based decline, it tends to suggest that, you are really mopping up the liquidity, and then you're also addressing the underlying issues. So I think it's a number of things that appear to come together to ensure that we see this kind of inflation decline.
And again, when you take a look at the month-on-month numbers, we even recorded disinflation figures. Are you surprised by that?
A deflation, actually. It was a negative inflation. So, yeah. But when you see this kind of substantial year-on-year, it's not surprising to see that kind of deflation on month-on-month. I think generally, as for short-term movement, usually the changes are relatively of smaller magnitude. So it's possible for you to see that. But I think if you look at what has happened between, especially on the fuel side, on the transport side, and some of the major other items, it's not surprising to see that we see that negative inflation for that on month.
So for you, what should government do to sustain this good run? And is government's end-year inflation target really achievable?
Oh, I think, if you are having this number halfway through the year, then absolutely, I think the target was 11.9. There are chances that they will probably meet it and then exceed it. So we could actually end the year with inflation being even much lower than the government's target. In terms of what has to be done, I think, yes, especially food inflation has, it was great, even somewhat surprising to see it decline that much. But I think we are entering a crucial season for food production, and I think it's important that we make the right kind of investment. Sometimes when we see a lot of rain, it's good for farming, but it can also be very bad idea for the roads, especially, with our reliance on road to transport food. So I think more investment in that side, especially the roads that connect the major production areas to the major market centers. I think doing that kind of investment will help. But also, I think it's important that, in the medium term, the central bank continue to keep the tight monetary policy stance until the inflation is firmly entrenched in the medium term target. Then it can begin to ease off a little bit.
Nia ekoso ewo yemai Ghana mu ene mesho se ko comment section na fa comment no ebrem na mejebre akenkan ede ama ofefefe aha eye Ghanatube so insema ekoso ena onsa ebeka subscribe na hit notification bell no for more news updates see ade akamo.